Think of that, lacking only 2 years of being a century old. I think it's safe to say that no one in the world living today has looked upon the things this man has seen. No man will ever see them again, for William Henry Jackson is part and parcel of America's Old West. It was 75 years ago, way back in 1866, that he worked his way west on the Oregon Trail as a bullwhacker. He was the first man who ever took pictures in the Yellowstone country. With his camera and with his able brush, he has photographed and painted a record of our early West that would not exist otherwise. He went as a bullwhacker with the Mormons to Salt Lake. He was with a mule freight outfit that lugged stuff over the mountains to a little village called Los Angeles. He rode herd on Mustangs around another little village called Omaha. Because this man had the eye of an artist and the instinct of a historian, we have a better understanding today of the beginning of our great West. Much of the development of the West was aided by his work. A magnificent and full life you've had, William Henry Jackson, and here's thanks and the nation's best wishes to you on your 98th birthday. That was in the broadcast this morning. And now we're very happy, Mr. Jackson, that you're here with us now and can tell us in your own words some of these things that I know you would like to have us know. Well, on your last trip across the West, did you notice any changes in the character and the vigor of the grass from that which you observed in the 70s?
Well, that's been called to my attention lately by modern pictures that people have sent me from the Conservation Society. There I was called to mind the great difference of the luscious grass that we used to camp on, which are now dusty plains, some parts of the middle western Wyoming.
Well, do you remember how the cowboys handled their trail herds in the great cattle drives between Texas and Montana?
I am now engaged in painting a picture covering that very subject, showing the big drive of the old Longhorn period up across the old Chisholm Trail into Wyoming.
That's as you remembered.
Yes. I only crossed the trail. I didn't follow it.
I see. Now, just when did sheep begin to compete seriously with cattle?
Oh, along the late 80s and 90s.
And you were a part of all those differences of opinion that took place at that time.
I more acquainted that country before the cowboy came in even. I like to think of that period before the cowboy period. The cowboys began to come in during the 70s, and they had the full sway for the next 10 years. And then they began to compete with the homesteaders and the cowboys.
Well, now, did you actually see any of these old range wars that took place?
No, I never. The Johnson County War, as they call it, in Wyoming, that country, was a little bit out of my territory. We were up in the mountains more. My work with the Geological Survey was almost entirely in the mountains, and that's what's on the plains. Where all that warfare occurred.
You've seen lots of buffalo, I expect, haven't you?
Oh, millions of them.
Would you like to tell us about what those herds looked like when you saw them?
Oh, a great mass of dark brown animals moving, grazing across the plain. When I first saw a great herd, it was the first year the Kansas Pacific ran across the plains, and we ran through them all day long, passing through buffalo. I had to stop the train to get them off the track. They stopped several times. They were as far as you could see in the distance on those flat plains. In the extreme distance, you could still see them moving on.
You mean this was just one herd that took the entire day for the train?
Well, they were all, it wasn't a herd really, it's a whole mass of buffalo. One great mass of them all came together, not in different herds, but one great movement covering miles of territory.
Would you estimate how many might be in such a...
Oh, very impossible to guess. Some people call it millions, but that's rather excessive.
Did you see the hunting of the buffalo?
Oh, thousands.
How did they hunt the buffalo then? How did they hunt the buffalo?
Oh, just by horseback and chasing, running up onto them. The old Indian with his spear and bow and arrow, and our modern people with their guns. I myself ran down several buffalo using only a revolver, riding up close to them and firing on their left flank.
How about other game? Other game?
Oh, that is abundant, of course. But game on the trail as we traveled was sometimes hard to find. Game at that time was shy. A large body traveling through the country necessarily made mourners disturbance, and the game would scatter into the mountains and hide away. So that sometimes we even had to employ hunters to go out and get the game for our own meals.
Well, that was good.
Couldn't always find it on the trail.
What would you say was the fertility of the soil then?
Oh, of course,
Difference between that and
necessarily in the bottoms, around through where the stream flowed through, the flat valley bottoms and the sweetwater valleys, all those western streams, the fertility seems to be very good indeed. Of course, that's all proved by the fine crop they raised when they came into production.
Well, now, was there water in the streams in those days?
Oh, yes, not much. Water was not conserved then. There were dry seasons when the streams almost go dry. But, of course, at that time, early day, there's no irrigation, except in a very small way, so that they confined themselves to immediate vicinity of the water.
But there was no
They didn't
dust
depend
bowl.
upon rainfall at all. They did depend for such crops as they had upon irrigation, but in a limited way.
Well, what did people do for amusement in those days? What were their amusements?
Oh, I don't know. There's no amusement such as we know it today. They all went to bed early and got up early.
I see. What about the social life?
Oh, the social life is occasional gathering of all people for a dance, like the old-fashioned barn dance. All the ranchmen had their dancing night. That was the great amusement, I might say, of all, gathering the people all together for a dance. And the old-time square dances were almost universally at that time. All of us could find a fiddler or somebody who could play music of some kind.
Well, a man who might have been out there at that time, making a living on that land, how did he make his money? How much money was needed, or did he just by
Well,
bartering
they mostly concerned making a living, not for selling so much. That came in mostly with the cattle business later. And also when the overland stage lines were running, by raising hay and such things for the service of the Pony Express and the overland stage and things of that kind. Those places all had to be stocked with hay. They lived upon that almost entirely. And of course that's one of the first products, you might say, was, of course, when the Mormons went in there, they began at once with the wheat crop. On the first year of their entrance into Salt Lake Valley, they had a wheat crop going at once by sowing the wheat and corn, I should say, besides the wheat.
Let's see. What do you recall, Mr. Jackson, as, in your opinion, the most interesting thing that happened to you in your entire experience in the West? Do you have any one thing that you think would be an outstanding experience?
Well, it's pretty hard to segregate one item because my experience has been so
You want a glass of
has
water?
been so widespread in general.
That's right. Just take a drink.
But I've always called the most interesting period of my life, the 10 years I spent in the West with the Hayden Survey. That's always been my most interesting period. New things to saw, new places to photograph, first things to bring to the attention of the world, to make the Yellowstone region known, to make the mountain, the Holy Cross known to the people, to make known to people the cliff dwellings of the South. All very interesting things in themselves, but no one startling, dramatic, single incident, you might say, that would stand out prominently from all the rest.
You have probably been the first man to have looked upon, or the first white man at any rate, to have looked upon many of those natural wonders out there. Have you not been?
Well, in a way, not the first to look upon them so much as to perpetuate them in pictures. Pretty hard to say in this America of ours where a man has not been.
Well, that's true,
But
too.
we're among the first people to follow on the tails of those unnamed people, trappers and people of that kind, who may have seen these things. But we were the first to make them publicly known.
Well, what were some of those things that you made known for the first time to the rest of the country?
Yellowstone, Holy Cross, the cliff dwelling, the main Rocky Mountain chain of peaks, Fremont's Peak, and all the big, the Teton Mountains, all the prominent features today in the scenic wonders of the West.
I have seen some of those pictures you've made, Mr. Jackson, made on the tops of mountains, where you knew that it must have been tremendously difficult just to get to the point and carrying
That was the main
equipment.
part of my experience with the Hayden survey, was carrying that cumbersome, very weighty photographic apparatus to tops of high peaks. The apparatus for making pictures mounted to fully 100 pounds of weight you had to carry up. Of course, I had to have assistants, generally 3 of us. We'd carry our pack animals up the mountain as far as we could. Then we'd distribute their loads to our own soldiers, to our own shoulders, and carry it to the tops of the peaks. I covered pretty nearly all of the high peaks of Colorado in that way, from the including Fremont and all the high peaks of Colorado, and carried up my water and all the apparatus and the cameras and everything that kind for making the pictures. Sometimes I had to spend nearly all day on top to get pictures between intermittent storms that come over the peaks.
And now these days we think it's quite an achievement if a man goes up there carrying a minicam with him.
Oh, it's playboy time. Playboy time.
Would you tell us something about the way you had to make pictures in those days? Some of the way you had to make pictures, how you made the exposure.
Briefly, our old process before 1880, when the drag plate came into being, was what we call the wet collodion process. We carried out clean glass plates, a whole lot of them, a whole lot of chemicals, collodions and developers and iron solutions and acid solutions and everything and filters and trays and bottles and everything of that kind, besides a portable darkroom to work in. We had to go into that little tent, take one of those clean glass plates, floor it with a collodion, immerse it in a silver bath of nitrate of silver, and while still wet, put in a plate holder and expose in the usual way. Then it had to be developed immediately after while wet, and the plate dried as well as we could, stored in a glued box to protect it in that condition, and in camp had to be clothed with a protective varnish and packed away. I have tried, on one occasion, by coaching my assistants, see how quickly we could make a picture from the arriving at the point where I wanted us to be made. We had to unpack the mule, of course, and distribute the apparatus, set up the tent, get the camera ready, and then I'd go into that little tent and coat my plate and prepare it for exposure. And after development, it is packed away, as I have said, and then put on the mule again. Under such conditions, with 2 assistants working with me, I've taken 30 minutes to make a picture, but ordinarily it takes more time than that. And once located, well, of course, you can make a number of pictures with a comparatively short time. Exposures on the plate at that time averaged all the way from sometimes even to 1 second up to 5, 10, 15, or 20 seconds for an exposure. Extreme cases up to minutes instead of seconds.
I expect in those days out there you've photographed many people, have you not, who've been a part of our West, of our early history?
We didn't photograph many people, many groups. We were rather limited on that account. We were outfitted for just about so much work. We couldn't carry only a fixed quantity of glass, because that is heavy. We generally had, as I might say, for a season's work, about 400 glass plates. And we were intent upon the scenery. We didn't care about our own credit. Didn't care about what they did themselves individually. We were interested in what they saw, new places, things of that kind. And towards the end of the season, if there were still things to be photographed that had not been taken, well, we'd wash off from the old group picture and use them for scenery. Of course, the scenery remained, but those people have passed, much to my regret in some cases.
You must have known and been acquainted, at any rate, with a lot of those characters of the early West, were you not?
They were not prominent in those days. We didn't think much of them. And it was all just one of us at the same time. Of course, I met pretty nearly all the prominent people, at least now, the well-known people of that period.
Would you like to mention some of those people of that day?
Uh-huh.
Would you like to mention some of those people of that day who played a part in making the West?
Oh, of course, there was, first of all, our old Geological Survey people. Besides Hayden, there's Powell, and there's Kane, and there's Wheeler, and all the people associated with it. And of course, in the early days, many of the old well-known scouts that figured largely in the undercover period of the West, like Bill Hickman and Cody and people in Cheyenne, in Denver, who like Matt Madison and some others, Masterson, some of those people whose names I don't recall just now. But they're all circulating more or less during that late 1670 period.
Well, Mr. Jackson, I just wouldn't know the questions to ask you to bring out the things that I know you'd like to say. Wouldn't you just like to go ahead and just talk now and tell us all of the things that you remember and what you think of their importance, both of yesterday and as they might be in relation to things today?
Well, you already have an inkling, have an outline of my story, but it's mostly concerned the survey period of the 60s and 70s. I began photography way back when I was 15 years old, way back when I was 17 or 18 years old. And pursuing that business with various scholars, it finally took me up into Vermont before the Civil War. There I got interested in the Civil War proceedings, of course, and went into a Vermont regiment and served down in the Army of the Potomac. Coming back from that into Vermont, I pulled up stakes in Vermont on account of a disrupted love affair, as they call it, went west. That was in 1866, as already mentioned. That work took me to California and back, returning from California behind the band of about 150 Mustang ponies, driving 2,000 miles across the country from Los Angeles to up through Salt Lake, back to Omaha. There I thought I'd had enough of that kind of wandering and went into the photographic business. Set up a gallery of my own and began working on the Union Pacific Road, then building westward, photographed that road from one end to the other. That brought me in contact with Dr. Hayden, who was then running a survey of the Western Territories. He liked my work so well and thought it should be an important part of his own work, and he induced me to join the survey. I gave up my business in Omaha as a local photographer, and for the next 9 years including, I worked with the survey. That, as I said, as I already mentioned, covered the most eventful period of my life, really. And from that time, when I quit the survey, I left Boston and went to Denver and set up in business for myself. My work from that time began with the rapid development of the Western railway system, branching out everywhere all over the West, Colorado especially, with the Rio Grande and the Santa Fe and the Southern Pacific, all those roads. They furnished me with private cars, crews, and engine and all that, and during the next 15 or 20 years, my work was almost entirely in following up the development of the Western Railroad. During that period, of course, I made a great many pictures for exhibitions, particularly for the Columbian Exposition in Chicago, '93. After that, I prepared a series of pictures over the Baltimore, Ohio Road that I had made the previous year. The publicity agent of that road, after the completion of that work, he conceived the idea of taking me around the world with the Transportation Commission, so-called. So in the latter part of '94, with a party of 5, we started abroad and spent the next 18 months going all over eastern continent, from all the way from England over to the far points of the Far East, down to Australia and the Philippines and the Japan, and finally to Vladivostok on the Pacific, and returned from there overland by sledge in the wintertime, making a 3,000-mile trip over the snowy roads of eastern Siberia, photographing all the way. Those pictures, by the way, being published in Harper's Weekly during that period, weekly in all the issues of that paper during the latter part of '95 and '96. That was one of my longest trips of that kind, because we took the whole route from Vladivostok to Moscow in covering that trip in that year. Returning from that to New York, we came back in the Depression period of the late 90s, and that kind of threw me out of business, until finally I joined in with a color printing concern and went to Detroit in '98, and for the next 25 years I engaged in color printing business, converting these photographs largely into color views, postcards largely. We turned out millions and millions of postcards, using all my old negatives made during the previous 40-odd years.
I understand that you're the father of the postcard, Mr. Jackson.
Well, that's the assumption, I think. When I was in the Army, I sent home in every letter a little picture the size of an envelope that I'd drawn out, a whole lot of them. And when I came home, I gathered them up to show again. Being a picture similar to the postcard, to the card picture, it might have been assumed that the first of the postcard, although not mailed as such, although it was mailed in an envelope. I made a great many. The writer in the Post here in New York presumed that to be the origin, but I couldn't say.
I
don't
that's
think
as
they were
logical an origin as...
What's
I think that's as logical an origin as anyone else
Yeah,
can say.
but I don't know when the picture being used for that purpose before that time. The little picture cards made different sizes and so on, but not the size of an envelope as a picture card as we know them today.
You've been responsible for a great many million people, I expect, then, saying, wish you were here, sending the picture where they were. In connection with your trip around the world, Mr. Jackson, since your eye had been for natural beauty, primarily, and you'd had the opportunity of seeing a great deal of our country, and then the opportunity to see the beautiful nature spots of other countries.
Yeah.
What, in your honest opinion, is the comparison there? Is America a beautiful country?
Well, the scenic part of America is pretty well done. Photographers now are more intent upon Hollywood and their latest interest now on the scenery of the country.
How would you
I'm not
say
in sympathy with. I've been a landscaper and a nature of scenery unadorned in the country.
Well, how would you say that our American scenery compares to the scenery of other nations?
Oh, there are little spots of it that are equal to and as attractive as anything you have abroad. Take the Jackson Hole country, for instance. Take our Yellowstone, which is unique. Take our Grand Canyon. Take our Yosemite. Things that cannot be paralleled anywhere else. And I think that we have here great an attraction that way, of course, as they have abroad. Of course, we haven't the Grand Alps, or haven't the Himalayas, and a great many things we haven't. But to have things equally attractive in a way, I think. People talk about the centenary of my work in the United States. I'm very happy to have it linked up here with the Geological Survey. And in connection with photography, which my light has been largely identified, I've covered a little more than 80 years of active service in photography, coming into it on the very heels of the old primitive daguerreotype process and following through all its courses up to the present time, mostly in connection with public surveys in the West. My early period across there was covered by sketches. Then I took up the work of the Geological Survey in 1870 and followed through all that decade of the 70s. And that brings me back here again after these 75-odd years to sojourn again with the explorers of today, Explorers Club and the Geological Survey and various allied organizations of that kind. My life has been devoted to picturizing the West. When I gave up photography and with the old processes, I took the pencil and the paintbrush and have preserved many mementos of the old trail in that way. Go on a little further.
Yes, go right ahead, Mr. Jackson.
Well, for the last 15 years, since I retired from active business, I've been more active than ever in carrying on the story of the Old West. That's been largely in connection with the work of the Oregon Trail Association, covering my original route across the continent, as well as picturizing it now for future records of the Old West. Because I bring to it not only my original work in sketches and so forth, but the memory of all those things which are still fresh in mind and able to carry on the old story by picture and other means of that kind. It's been a great pleasure to meet the boys of the Geological Survey here. I come here pretty nearly annually, although my home is now in New York. But I keep alive the old stories, and from here I go west every year, still following the old trails, from the Missouri River to the coast, as we call it, by foot and airplane and motor car and every imaginable way you can think of. I've covered, I think, pretty nearly every way of traveling across the continent.
Well, I want to thank you very, very much, Mr. Jackson, for coming up here and giving us this opportunity of having your voice put here in this transcription so we may know these things.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This electrical transcription is an interview with William Henry Jackson made on the eve of his 98th birthday and recorded in the radio studios of the Department of the Interior Thursday, April 3, 1941. Mr. Jackson was interviewed by Shannon Allen, director of the radio section of the Department of Interior.